Now, we've not done a tabletop radio on this channel before, despite it being a form factor that I actually quite like, and one that you don't see at all nowadays. This is an Eagle Rad 20W. Now, Eagle Electronics is a funny old British firm. I've tried looking them up on the internet and found not a great deal about their history. I do sort of recall them from the 70s and possibly 80s as a not quite a hi-fi manufacturer, sort of low-end radio manufacturer. They did make some hi-fi. I think they more went into making test equipment and things, and they still seem to exist as a brand, but not really advertised very much. They seem to be available through resellers, but mostly doing like 100-volt line PA equipment and things like that. But at that time, I do remember them having some sort of general lower-end hi-fi equipment, and they obviously made this radio, which is very similar to the sort of Grundig table radios that were around at the time, and I imagine also cost a little bit less than the Grundigs. I don't have a lot of documentation on this radio. Sorry, let's correct that. I don't have any documentation on this radio, and looking at the markings on it, it's got, we have to come close up again. Here's a zoom that we have, the manual zoom. We can see that radio 1 is on 2, so radio 2 is on medium wave, and radio 4 is on long wave, which means that it must be post 1978, and I'm guessing it's sort of early 80s, but although that would seem to be late for this sort of type of set. I think table radios were not really as much of a thing during the transistor era, although there are a few around from the 60s and 70s. I think they were more of a hangover from the valve era, when the sets necessarily had to be quite large, and therefore people wanted them to look more like an item of furniture. So, you know, they were styled with big, glossy wooden cabinets and things like that. And as the size of the components came down, there were still a few people who wanted the traditional old thing that sat on your mantelpiece or your sideboard or whatever, or in your kitchen. And this is that sort of thing. So, it's mains powered, obviously. There's no battery option on this. I've plugged it in so we can have a quick listen. So there's an LED. There's no scale illumination, as far as I can tell, unless it's broken. It's not selected on anything. It's got a phono input, which is what's selected at the moment. Let's put it on medium wave, and we can hear a lot of static, really. Make 4 pages from the walls. North Sahara is back for the first. So there's quite a lot of impulse noise there, which is not what I normally get. I mean, I normally get a fair bit of interference on medium wave in here, but not that sort of impulsive noise. So I'm guessing that will be the same if I switch to long wave. Hard to tell whether we're getting anything there at all. There's an interesting thing there, I just noticed. The on and off switch is a bit rubbish, isn't it? So I click that. As I move that in and out, I get better and worse sound. The odd thing is it sounds better just as it's turning off, and presumably there's a huge reservoir capacity discharging through it there. So maybe there's something wrong with the power supply. I'm guessing there is an internal ferrite rod aerial, but with a tabletop radio, it's not much use. So there is a separate let's have a look around the back of it. So looking around the back, we have a 300 ohm FM input here, a AM aerial input, DIN, which presumably is your tape recorder output, and your other auxiliary source input. Oh no, there's a separate one here. So that's the tape recorder output, and this one with the pickup symbol on it is presumably for playing something through into it. So it's got separate input and output, which sort of, when it's mono, negates the point of having a DIN connection, but these are obviously popular at the time. It's also got a DIN loudspeaker output here, so you can plug in an external loudspeaker. We're not going to hear much on FM without the aerial, so I'll plug that in a moment, although I think the noise is going to be a bit of an issue. I've got the model details here on the back. Now, it doesn't tell me anything about where this was made. I can't see anything that's... I'm not sure it would have been made in Britain by that time, even though it's a British company. Now, also, it's got not manufacturers, but the sellers' information on it here. Hughes TV and audio. Lowestoft, Norwich, Ipswich, etc. Well, I'm glad to announce that Hughes TV and Audio are still going. They don't have a branch in etc., but they do have one in Newmarket, which is the nearest one to me. I doubt whether they'd be very interested in helping me fix this radio, though. Yeah, let's get an aerial in the FM socket and see if we can get any FM reception, which might be a bit better than the AM, hopefully. So it's got the same impulsive noise on FM, although it does have reception. I've noticed also it's a bit out, so that was radio 4, and radio 4 should be around here, so it looks like it's about 2 megs out. Although when I think when we looked at the medium wave, it was about right, and it was getting radio 5 live around here, where it's expected. It says radio 2 on there, which is what would have been radio 2 back when this set was made. So I'm guessing there's a bit of either dodgy on and off switch that needs cleaning or repairing or whatever, but that impulse noise is a bit strange, so it's possibly we need to have a look at the power supply, I think. I'm not sure, as I said, I don't have any circuit diagram of this, so I'm just going to take it apart and have a look. I'm guessing it's a linear power supply. It wouldn't be a switch mode supply at this stage, although we're possibly, if it was made in the 80s, we might possibly be in that era. But anyway, let's get the back off and have a look. Yes, it comes apart reasonably easily. Typical late 70s, early 80s circuit board, I'd say there. Plastic case transistors, so I'm guessing they're silicon sort of things by that stage. This bit here, it looks to me like the output section for the speaker. In fact, we can probably tell that because it's got a pair of wires for the speaker going there. Then you've got the mains switch here, which we know to be a bit iffy. We'll try cleaning that up. Then it comes out of that all the way over these wires here into this big old transformer, so it is a linear power supply as I suspected. 4 diodes there as a bridge rectifier. I'm guessing that is the reservoir capacitor for the power supply, or smoothing capacitor, whatever. Right, so I put this across the output of the transformer. I'm just about to plug it in. So that's the low tension side of the transformer. And you can see we're getting a very fluctuating voltage there. So it's going from anything like... That's not helpful, is it? So you can see it's hovering around 9.5 volts, but when I turned it on, depending on what to do with this switching, it can go up to around 15. And I'm guessing that when it's... See, when it's at 15 volts or 15, 16 volts, it's fine.
It took a while for them to get their chance because everything was so established. But as a sport has...
So now it sounds great.
It needs those established people to realise that the element of competition is a good thing.
But now, of course, it's got to be that switch really just needs replacing, I think, is the answer to this. I can't see that there's any alternative. I could try taking it apart and cleaning it, but it's a mains push-on, push-off switch, so I should be able to find one that fits. Okay, I got the main switch out and about, and the bits of it here in this little tub I've been using to keep the parts in. Now, it's quite a complicated affair, really. I do like pulling these things to bits and trying to put them back together. I have actually ordered a replacement main switch, which isn't quite the same, but should fit, just in case I completely this up. But there's quite a lot of bits and pieces that you have to get at in order to refurbish this switch. And one of the biggest problems you have initially in taking them apart is getting this button off the front of them. It's always a very difficult thing to do, and it's so easy to break them. In fact, well, I think I've said before, if I'm cleaning them, or if I'm cleaning the buttons, I just try and get down the side of them. I very rarely would try to take the buttons off the switches because you usually end up breaking this bit. And they have put glue on it as well, which didn't help. But the only thing you can do really while it's still in situ in the thing is just really just use a screwdriver and lever it gently off one little tiny bit at a time until it starts moving. So you do have to display quite a lot of patience to get that to happen, which is not a virtue that I have in spades, I have to say. Right. Now, essentially, there's a very specific position in which every single one of these pieces has to go. So these little terminal pins here locate into a very tiny groove on those spring contacts. There's a couple of those little brown roller things are what push those apart, and then there's a spring inside the gap in those contacts, and that basically means that when I push this forward, and I have to be careful because it'll spring out again if I don't hold it down, you can see that those two contacts then press against these terminals here, and when you let go they spring back, and they spring back actually quite quickly. And that's quite an important thing with the main switch, because this is where it's different. In there you have, in this little DC switch, you have rubbing contacts. Apart from the fact that they don't have the capacity to carry mains current, it's not just that, it's the fact that you do need a complete separation. You need to pull apart, like rip the plaster off, otherwise you're going to get a lot of arcing, which is what we heard. I think that's more because some of these contacts are a bit rough and dirty, so I've cleaned it all up, but but you can see that it needs to sort of pull apart rather quickly, because if it doesn't, if there's any delay, you're going to get this sort of arcing effect, and then the contacts all get full of carbon and things, and it doesn't work properly. I forgot to mention another bit, didn't I, which is this little thing here. This latch, this little springy thing here, is the thing that makes it latch rather than momentary, so that needs to go onto the back of here as well, so that once that's on and in the right place, once you click it, it will stay in. Now, to say I'm not a massive fan of the way that this mains switch has been put so close to low voltage circuitry, nor in fact that the mains feed from the switch to the transformer is co-routed here, you can't quite see that, let me move it along, is co-routed here with the wires to the speaker, and also right through the input stages if you've got any audio inputs to it, and across the RF section. So it's not brilliant in that sense, but the safety considerations I was slightly concerned about there. I have obviously put the switch back. I've put double heat shrink on all of these connections. They're all quite tight and tied things up properly. I still think I'd like to put a new switch in, because I don't think that switch is particularly reliable, but we've got rid of the problem now with the intermittent behaviour and the arcing and things like that, which is good. So it is now functional. Now, it should go without saying, although it doesn't always, so I'm going to say it anyway, we are repairing a switch carrying dangerous voltage here, and if you do not know how to do this and you are not experienced at doing this, I would strongly recommend that you do not do it. It is not worth risking life and limb to get some old radio working again. A couple other interesting things about this radio. There's quite a lot of empty spaces here. It looks like there could have been a 16-pin chip in there and other stuff, and I have no documentation for it at all, but I'm guessing from that there were other options available. Maybe there was a stereo version of this, and that's what the other components were for. I don't know really, because I can turn up very little about the products of this company at that time. Oh, the other thing, we did have some questions, or I had a question, maybe nobody else did, about where this radio was actually made, and I think we've answered that question as well, because on the bottom here it says Gold Star, so it would have been made by Gold Star, which is a Korean company. I didn't think it would have been a British made set at that time, to be honest. Now the other thing we mentioned was that on the FM band, the stations weren't aligned to the scale marks, and I fixed that as well. Now again, I have no documentation for this, so I didn't have anything that I could do a proper alignment with, and you certainly don't want to go around randomly tweaking stuff. Also, anything like inductor cores or things like that, you have to be quite careful with on radios of this age. They'll just fall to bits, and then you'll end up with nothing. You won't have a working radio at all, unless you can source some inductors or transformers to them, which is always very difficult. It's difficult to really show you this, because I can't always show you. The radio's so big, it's difficult for me to show you both sides of it. But what I did was looked at the tuning capacitor here. Now there's two tweakers on each of the AM and FM bands here. And first of all, you don't know which is which. But basically, by trial and error, you just tweak it a little bit and see if anything happens. If it doesn't, then you move it back to where it was. Again, this is not proper alignment. I'm not saying this is the right way to do things, but you have to take a reasonable view on what you can do with a 40-year-old radio that you have no documentation for. And essentially, one of these will move it and one of them will peak it, and I can probably show you that by adjusting it again. If I switch it on,
a London Stock Exchange eventually.
A Cambridgeshire disability charity says it's expected.
now we have the advantage here of having Radio Cambridge, which is dead on 96 FM. So if I stick it on 96 FM and it's not on that, and indeed I think you saw earlier it wasn't showing as 96, it was showing quite a bit further up the scale.
We actually helped him.
If I turn one of these,
And basically, he was so pleased. He got it at the higher rate, which is £90 a week, which is a lot of money per person. It's something so
then that moves it
that we're there
in relation to where it is on the scale.
and actually we support them through the process.
The latest figures suggest.
And then having moved it,
in April, following 7 consecutive.
this one can be used to peak it.
The Nationwide Building Society said the.
And that's really all you need to do, as long as you... I'll be quiet. That's really all you need to do, as long as, you know, it's not massively out, then that will work. And if it is massively out and that doesn't work, I would say don't go around trying to tweak any of this stuff or whatever, because you don't know what it is without the circuit diagram. You're likely to make it worse and end up with a non-working radio. And it's better to have a working radio that's showing the wrong scale marks than a non-working radio that's only of use as a doorstop. And to be honest, this is the wrong shape or size for a doorstop anyway.
Of signals that humans give off as their bodies change, and for me,
Don't make me wait.
Meet with the bride to try them on.
Zara Larson here on the Jeremy Salis Show. It's BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
Sex me so good I say blah blah.
Seven minutes. And they scored a goal in the 83rd minute, which equalised and relegated us and kept West Bromwich Albion.
For us to be able to concentrate on and enjoy maybe more.
Environment, but a lot of the components are genetic dependent, and that means that you actually have them in the factory.
So overall, it doesn't do badly, really. I've got an external FM aerial and an external AM aerial plugged into it. It's got the internal ferrite rod. I don't think my external AM aerial is doing much good. I hope that might improve the long wave reception for BBC Radio 4 without having to turn the radio around. That doesn't seem to be the case. In general, it picks up a fair number of radio stations and the sound isn't too bad. But I think the whole point of these radios was a little bit lost, really, probably by the time this one was made. It's not portable, obviously, but even in a domestic situation, if you stuck it in your kitchen, it's no good having to turn it around to get different stations. Now, some of these sort of things, and we're going to look at one in I don't know whenever it comes up the list, have got a little thing that you can rotate it from the back, and so it's got a mechanism inside to rotate the ferrite rod aerial. I very much doubt whether many people had a loop aerial connected to their table radios. The FM thing, that you know, again, it's just a little 300 ohm wire, so not too bad. And as I said, it gives quite good reception, picks up quite a few stations. FM performance generally fairly good, but it takes up a lot of space, and I have to say, for the space it takes up, you'd expect slightly better sound, you know, and the sound is not bad, but it's not brilliant. And if you compare it to some of the old valve radios, they would have sounded a lot better. I think by this time these things were for a very shrinking number of customers who wanted this shape of radio, and I must admit I've always been a big fan of them. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.